The greatest king in the history of Israel was also a murderer. The man who wrote the songs you sing in church. The man God himself called a man after my own heart. That same man arranged the death of an innocent soldier to cover up what he'd done with the man's wife. And here is the part nobody tells you. God did not erase it. He could have. He wiped it into no history book, no cleanup, no cover story. He left David's worst night in the book forever, for you to read. The question is why? Before we go in, comment where you're watching from. I read every single one, because I think a lot of you are here tonight carrying something you're sure God could never forgive. By the end of this, you're going to meet the one story in the Bible that proves you wrong. This is the king who fell, as for you. So one evening, unable to sleep, King David got up from his bed and walked out onto the roof of the palace. From up there, a king could see everything, and that night, he saw something he was never meant to take. What he did next would cost an innocent man his life, break the heart of God, and follow David's name for 3,000 years. This is where the king fell. From the roof of the palace, David saw a woman bathing, and she was very beautiful. Now understand, the seeing was not the sin. A glance is a moment. Anyone can be surprised by one. The Bible is precise here, and so should we be. David's fall did not happen in the first look. It happened in the second. Because he could have turned around. He could have walked back inside. Instead, the king, who once waited years for God to give him a throne, decided he would not wait one evening for anything. He sent someone to find out who she was, and the answer that came back should have stopped everything cold. This is Bathsheba, the wife of Uriah the Hittite. She was married to one of his own soldiers, a man who, at that very moment, was out on the battlefield, fighting David's war, while David stayed home. He knew. That is what makes this the fall and not an accident. He was told plainly that she belonged to another man, and he sent for her anyway. The shepherd who would not take Saul's life when it was handed to him now reached out and took another man's wife simply because he could. He took her, and then he sent her home, as if a thing like that could be sent home. As if a king could close a door and make it never have happened. For a few weeks, maybe he believed he had gotten away with it. Powerful men often do. That's the terrible mercy of power. It lets you avoid the consequence just long enough to convince yourself there won't be one. And then a message arrived at the palace. Just 2 words, and they detonated David's entire life.
I'm pregnant.
Her husband was on the battlefield. Everyone could count. There was no version of this that stayed hidden on its own. And in that instant, David faced the choice that every person who has ever done wrong eventually faces. The choice that decides everything. Confess or cover. Own it before God and man. Take the shame and trust mercy. Or hide it, manage it, bury it, and become a different kind of man in the process. David, the man after God's own heart, chose to cover. And a covered sin never stays one sin. It always grows. The plan was simple, almost clever. Bring the husband home from the war. Let him spend the night with his wife, and the child would look like his. So David sent for Uriah. And here the story does something almost unbearable. It makes you fall in love with the man David is about to destroy. The king greets him warmly, asks how the war is going, small talk to hide an execution, and then says,
"Go down to your house, rest, wash your feet.
Go home to your wife." But Uriah does not go home. He sleeps at the palace gate on the ground with the servants. When David asks why, Uriah's answer lands like a verdict the soldier doesn't even know he's delivering.
The ark and Israel and Judah are staying in tents. My commander and my fellow soldiers are camped in the open field. How could I go home to eat and drink and sleep with my wife? As surely as you live, I will not do such a thing.
Sit with the weight of that. The foreign soldier, the Hittite, the outsider, has more integrity in his sleep than the king of Israel had on his rooftop. Uriah will not enjoy comfort while his brothers suffer in the field. The very thing David should have been doing, Uriah is doing without being asked. The righteous man is standing right in front of the guilty one, and the guilty one decides the righteous man has to die. David tries again. If honor won't send Uriah home, maybe wine will. So he keeps him another day and gets him drunk at the king's own table. The king personally lowering a good man's guard to trick him into covering a crime he knows nothing about. And even drunk, even with his judgment gone, Uriah still will not go home. He sleeps again among the servants. A sober king could not out-honor a drunk soldier. And that is the moment David crosses the line there is no walking back from. Because when hiding fails, a covered sin only has one move left. If Uriah will not go home, then Uriah cannot be allowed to come home at all. The next morning, David wrote a letter, and he chose Uriah to carry it. The soldier walked back to the battlefield with a sealed message in his own hand, never knowing that he was carrying his own death warrant to the man who would carry it out. Inside, David's orders to his general Joab were cold and exact.
Put Uriah out in front, where the fighting is fiercest. Then pull back from him, so that he is struck down and dies.
Not kill him, something worse. Arrange it. Engineer it. Let the enemy's sword do what the king wants done, so the king's own hands stay clean. Murder, dressed up as a casualty of war. And it worked. Joab placed Uriah at the wall, where the fighting was worst. The men pulled back, and Uriah the Hittite, the most honorable man in the entire story, fell, exactly as the king had planned. When the news of the losses reached David, he sent back a message to comfort his grieving general. And it is the most chilling line David ever spoke.
Don't let this trouble you. The sword devours one as well as another.
Don't let it trouble you. As if it were nothing. As if a good man's blood were just the cost of doing business. The boy who would not touch God's anointed had become a man who could order a murder and call it weather. Maybe you're watching this and thinking, I could never do what David did. But look at how it happened. He didn't wake up that morning planning to kill anyone. Nobody does. It went one small step at a time, a look he didn't turn from, a want he wouldn't wait on, a truth he chose to hide instead of confess. And every step made the next one feel necessary. That's how it works. Nobody decides to become the villain. We just decide, over and over, not to stop. You've felt the pull of that first cover-up, haven't you? The lie to protect the lie. The thing you did that you're still managing so no one finds out. The way hiding it has slowly made you someone you don't fully recognize. Here's what this ancient king wants you to know tonight. The cover-up will cost you more than the confession ever would. It always does. David is about to spend nearly a year finding that out. And that silence, the year he thought he'd gotten away with it, is where we're going next. David married Bathsheba. She came to the palace. The child was on the way. The battlefield was quiet. The secret was buried. From the outside, the king had done it. He had gotten away with all of it. The problem was managed. The witnesses were gone. Life moved on. And then the book of 2 Samuel adds 7 words that hang over everything that comes next. But the thing David had done displeased the Lord. David thought the story was over. He thought the roof and the letter and the grave had closed the matter. He had forgotten that there was a witness on that rooftop he could not send away, could not get drunk, could not send to the front line. Heaven had seen all of it, and heaven was about to send a man with a story and 4 words that would break the king in half. On the outside, David had won. The soldier was buried. Bathsheba was his wife. The child was born. The scandal never broke. The kingdom ran on. The sun came up. The court bowed, and no one knew what the king had done in the dark. For nearly a year, David got away with it. And here is the thing almost nobody tells you about getting away with it. It is the loneliest place a human being can live, because David couldn't undo it and he wouldn't confess it. So he did the only thing left. He carried it, alone, every single day, smiling in the throne room with a grave in his chest. We don't have to guess what that year felt like. David wrote it down. Years later, he opened his journal to the whole world in 2 songs, Psalm 32 and Psalm 51, and told us exactly what the silence did to him. And if you have ever carried something you couldn't say out loud, you are about to hear your own life described by a man who died 3,000 years ago. Listen to how David described the year he stayed silent.
When I kept silent, my bones wasted away through my groaning all day long. For day and night, your hand was heavy on me. My strength was sapped as in the heat of summer.
Read that slowly, because that is not poetry. That is a symptom list. My bones wasted away, my strength dried up. Day and night, a weight I could not put down. David is telling us that unconfessed guilt is not just a feeling, it moves into the body. It sits on your chest at 3 a.m., it steals the appetite, it ages the face, it turns rest into exhaustion and turns every quiet moment into an accusation. This is the man who once played the harp until evil spirits fled. And now he cannot quiet the one voice inside his own head. The songs have gone silent. The shepherd who feared nothing in the valley is afraid of his own thoughts when the palace goes dark. Guilt kept in the dark doesn't disappear. It grows in the dark. That's what the dark is for. Maybe this is the part of the story you didn't expect to see yourself in. Not the crime, the carrying. You know what it is to sit in a room full of people who love you and feel completely alone, because there is one thing about you that none of them know. You've learned to perform the version of yourself they expect, the fine, the okay, the good, and you, while the real thing stays locked in a room you never let anyone into. That is the loneliest kind of pain there is. Not being alone, being unknown. David had a palace full of servants, an army that adored him, wives, children, power. And he had never been more isolated in his life, because a secret doesn't just separate you from God. It separates you from everyone, all at once, in a crowd. If that's you tonight, watching this alone, carrying something no one in your life has ever heard, then understand, David is not a warning to you. He is a mirror, and the God who is about to walk into his story already knows every word of yours. Keep watching, because the silence is not where this ends. Here is what David could not see in the middle of it, but understood completely by the time he wrote it down. That heavy hand he felt, day and night, that weight that wouldn't lift, that was not God leaving him. That was God refusing to. Think about it. God could have let David go. He could have let the king harden, get comfortable, feel nothing, and slide quietly into the kind of man who does monstrous things and sleeps just fine. That happens to people. The scariest thing that can happen to a guilty soul is to stop feeling guilty. But God loved David too much to let him get away with it. So the weight David felt was not punishment for its own sake. It was a mercy. It was grace disguised as misery. The relentless pressure of a God who would not let one of his own drift off into the dark, unbothered. If tonight you can still feel the weight of the thing you've done, if it still robs your sleep, if it still won't leave you alone, do not read that as God's rejection. Read it as God's pursuit. The ache is not him walking away, it's him refusing to. Numbness is the danger. The ache means he's still holding on. Picture the palace at night. The city sleeps. Bathsheba sleeps. The guards stand at their posts. And in the highest room, the most powerful man in Israel lies awake, staring at a ceiling he cannot see, because the dark in the room is nothing compared to the dark in him. He has everything. And he would trade all of it, the throne, the gold, the crown, for one night of the clean conscience he had back when he was a nobody watching sheep. Somewhere in that year, the words that would become Psalm 51 were already forming in the silence.
Wash me, cleanse me, create in me a clean heart. Restore to me the joy I used to have.
But he can't say them yet. Not really. Because a guilty man can want to be clean and still not be willing to be caught. And David is still hoping he can have the forgiveness without the confession, the healing without the wound reopening. God is about to take that option away from him, because mercy, real mercy, was already on its way up the palace steps, and it was wearing the face of a prophet named Nathan. One day, the prophet Nathan asked to see the king, and he did not come with an accusation. He did not come with thunder or a pointed finger or the sin laid bare. He came with a story, a small, simple story about a rich man, a poor man, and one little lamb. David leaned in to listen, with no idea that the story was a trap, and that he was already standing inside it. No idea that in about 60 seconds, this quiet little parable was going to turn around, look him dead in the eyes, and say 4 words that would tear the roof off the year of silence and bring the whole thing crashing down.
You are the man.
And everything David had buried was about to be dug back up, in the throne room, in front of God, with nowhere left to hide. Nathan stood before the king, and he began to tell a story.
There were 2 men in a certain town. One was rich, with vast flocks and herds, more than he could count. The other was poor, and had nothing except one little lamb. He had bought it and raised it, and it grew up with him and his children. It ate from his own plate. It drank from his own cup. It slept in his arms. It was like a daughter to him.
The king is listening now, drawn all the way in.
One day a traveler came to the rich man, but the rich man would not take from his own vast flocks to feed his guest. Instead, he went and took the poor man's one little lamb and killed it and served it.
And David erupts. The old fire, the shepherd's heart, the king's sense of justice, all of it comes roaring up at once. He rises from his throne and swears,
As surely as the Lord lives, the man who did this deserves to die. He must pay for that lamb 4 times over, because he did this thing and had no pity.
There it is. The king has pronounced his sentence. Loud, certain, righteous. Furious at a rich man who took the one thing a poor man loved, while a soldier named Uriah lies in a grave for the exact same crime committed by the exact same king. David has just sentenced himself to death, and he does not even know it. He is standing inside the trap, congratulating himself for spotting the villain, and Nathan lets the silence hang for one breath. Then he lifts his eyes to the king he has served, and he says the 4 words that split David's life into before and after.
You are the man.
You. The rich man with everything is you. The poor man was Uriah. The one little lamb was his wife. The traveler was your want, that you fed with another man's life.
This is what the Lord says.
I anointed you king. I rescued you from Saul. I gave you your master's house and the whole house of Israel. And if all that had been too little, I would have given you more. So why did you despise the word of the Lord by doing evil in his eyes? You struck down Uriah with the sword and took his wife.
Every wall David spent a year building comes down in a single sentence. The letter, the battlefield, the comfort message to Joab, the wedding. God names all of it out loud in the throne room. There is no managing this now, no sending it home. For the first time in a year, the thing in the dark is standing in the light, and it has the king's name on it. Now watch what David does, because this single moment is the reason God ever called him a man after his own heart. Not because he did not sin. He sinned as badly as a man can. It is because of what he does in the 60 seconds after he is caught. He does not make an excuse. He does not blame Bathsheba. He does not spin it, minimize it, or have Nathan killed for the insult. And a king absolutely could. And David says it back, just as bare.
I have sinned against the Lord.
That is it. No qualifier. No excuse. Just the naked truth. Finally spoken. Compare him to the king before him. When Saul was confronted with his sin, he made excuses. He blamed the people. He protected his image to the very end. That is the difference between a heart that is hard and a heart that is broken. Both men failed. Only one of them was willing to be caught, be named, and be broken open before God. David's greatness was never that he did not fall. It was that when he was finally seen, he stopped hiding. And Nathan's answer comes back just as fast as the confession.
The Lord has taken away your sin. You are not going to die.
Feel the speed of that. There is no waiting room, no probation. The moment David stops hiding, mercy is already there, ahead of him, faster than he can even ask. That is what grace does. It runs to meet the confession. But this is where the story refuses to lie to you. Forgiven does not mean no consequences. Nathan tells him the child born of this will not live. God lifts the guilt, completely, eternally, but he does not vacuum the wreckage out of David's life. The relationship is restored. The ripples still travel. And there is a mercy, even in that hard truth. You can be fully forgiven by God and still be walking through the consequences of what you did. Grace was never a promise that the wound would leave no scar. It was a promise that the scar would no longer separate you from God. And here is a question the story leaves you to sit with. Why did God wait? Nearly a year passed between the rooftop and Nathan. Why the wait? Because God was not absent that year. He was working. He let the wait do its work. He waited until the king was ready, not just to be caught, but to be broken and healed. Maybe you are in your own version of that year right now. David's year tells you the silence is not absence. Sometimes the wait is the mercy. The child grew sick, and for 7 days David lay on the ground, refusing food, pleading with God for the little life. On the 7th day, the child died. But when David heard, he did something that stunned everyone. He got up, he washed, he worshipped, and then he ate.
While the child was alive, I fasted and wept. But now he is gone. Can I bring him back? I will go to him, but he will not return to me.
There is a strange, hard-won peace beginning here. The peace of a man who has stopped running and finally handed everything, even his grief, even his guilt, back to God. And somewhere in the ruins of that year, David reached for a pen. He was about to write the most honest prayer in human history, Psalm 51. The sound of a fallen king learning that grace goes lower than he ever felt. So the fallen king picked up a pen, and he wrote a prayer so honest that 3,000 years later we are still praying it in his words. He did not begin by defending himself. He began by throwing himself entirely on the one thing he had left.
Have mercy on me, O God, according to your unfailing love. According to your great compassion, blot out my transgressions. Wash away all my iniquity and cleanse me from my sin.
Listen to what he asks for. Not get me out of trouble, not fix my reputation, not make the consequences go away. He asks to be clean.
Create in me a clean heart, O God, and renew a right spirit within me. Do not cast me from your presence. Restore to me the joy of your salvation.
Do you hear the deepest fear underneath it? Do not cast me from your presence. That's the real terror of a guilty soul. Not the punishment, but the loss of God himself. The fear that you've finally done the thing that puts you outside his reach for good. And the entire weight of this story, everything we've watched for the last hour, is bending toward one answer to that fear. You haven't. This is the part I need you to hear. Whoever you are, wherever you're watching from tonight, David committed adultery. David committed murder. David spent a year lying to everyone, including himself. By any honest measure, he did the unforgivable, and God washed him clean, called him restored, and never once let go of him. So whatever you've been carrying into this video, the thing you were sure was too much, the sin you've never said out loud, the failure you've decided disqualifies you forever, hear this. The grace of God goes lower than you have ever fallen. There is no basement in your life that mercy hasn't already reached the floor of. You cannot out-sin it. You cannot get beneath it. David tried, with about the worst a man can do, and grace was still there, underneath him, waiting. The only thing grace ever asks is the one thing David finally did. Stop hiding. Come out of the dark. Say the true thing. I have sinned. And let yourself be caught by the God who was never chasing you to destroy you, but to bring you home. You are not too far gone. That is the entire point of why this story is in the book. And now the detail that should be impossible. Open the New Testament, 1,000 years after David is dead. God is describing him to a crowd, summing up the whole life of this king in one line. Knowing everything, the rooftop, Bathsheba, the letter, Uriah, the year of lies. And God says,
I have found David, a man after my own heart, who will do all my will.
A man after my own heart, present tense. Not he was before he fell, not despite his failures. God hands David his identity back, whole, and never attaches an asterisk to it. How? How does the murder and the adultery not become the headline of his life forever? Because that is what forgiveness actually is. Not God pretending it didn't happen. The whole account is right there in Scripture, in permanent ink. It's God deciding that the thing you did will not be the thing that defines you. The world defines you by your worst day. Grace defines you by whose you are. David's sin is written down forever, and it still is not his name. His name is a man after God's own heart. And if God can do that for a man who did what David did, then the label you've been wearing, failure, addict, liar, the thing I did, is not permanent either. It's just the name you had before grace renamed you. And here is the strange gift buried in the wreckage of David's worst year. Because he fell, and because he was honest about falling, we have Psalm 51. The prayer that has carried more broken people back to God than almost any words ever written. Every believer who ever whispered, "Create in me a clean heart," in the dark, was handed those words by a murderer who found mercy. God did not waste David's fall. He redeemed it. He took the worst thing David ever did and turned it into the doorway 100 generations of guilty, desperate people would walk through to find grace. That's what God does with a surrendered failure. He doesn't just forgive it. He puts it to work. The very thing the enemy meant to destroy you becomes the exact thing God uses to reach someone else, standing where you're standing now. Your fall is not the end of your usefulness to God. In His hands, it might just be the beginning of it. The king who fell did not end his story in the ashes of that rooftop. He ended it forgiven, restored, still called God's friend, and holding a pen that would comfort the whole world. That was never about David being special. It was about God being merciful. And the same mercy that reached the highest man in Israel at his lowest moment is reaching into wherever you are tonight. The car, the kitchen at 3 a.m., the bed you can't sleep in. And saying the same thing it said to David. Come out of the dark. You are not too far gone. Come home. So let me ask you the way I promised at the start. Comment where you're watching from. I read every single one. And if this story found you carrying something tonight, tell me one word in the comments. Clean. Just so you've said it once, out loud, where someone can see it. Let tonight be the night you stopped hiding. If David's fall and God's grace meant something to you, share this with the one person you thought of while you watched. They're on your heart for a reason. And the story isn't over. The next chapter is already on the screen. Because the God who refused to erase David's sin and refused to let David go has been doing the same thing all through this book. I'll show you where he does it next. Press play. I'll see you there.
If this story moved you, subscribe. The next one will change everything.